My name is Jennifer Pulliam, and I'll be doing a video reflection on the two podcasts that I listen to, The American Life, The Problem We All Live With, Part 1 and Part 2. The first part of the podcast began with Nicole Hannah-Jones, and she was talking about integration and how it's needed to close the achievement gap. And the one thing that they talked about is between 1971 and 1988, this was the peak of integration in United States schools. She also talked about how at that time, Black teenagers were 39 points lower in standardized testing, but it dropped to 18 points by 1988. And one thing she mentioned was that integration gets Black kids access to the same things as white kids, like quality teachers and materials. I feel like, especially I live in Las Vegas, there's definitely a bad part of town here, and I see that here. I recognize that the bad schools, the bad school areas, they do not have the resources that the better schools might have. When I looked up the ethnic demographics, I looked up the school that my son is zoned for, and he is going to be going to kindergarten next year. And we live in an okay area in Las Vegas, but I was concerned because the schools that he's zoned for were not the best scores. He is on the spectrum of autism. He has an IEP. I looked into charter schools, magnet schools. I asked around. I asked my boss, who was a preschool director, but also she was a principal for charter schools. What would she recommend? And she said, well, if you go with a charter school, they might not always honor his IEP. Your best bet is the public school system. And mind you, in Las Vegas, Clark County School District, we are ranked 49th in the whole nation. It is not the best. So thinking about integration for me, it's not something I think about. I just want my son to go to a school where I know he's going to excel and where they're going to work with him. They're going to work with his IEP. When he's aged out or he gets exited from his IEP, I hope they'll still work with him, because it is going to be harder for him, especially socially, to attend school. Looking at what Nicole Hannah-Jones was saying, she says that when they were researching in Missouri, in the Normandy School District, they say that most the Black-only schools, most kids come from poverty, from bad households, and they fail when they put in a class together with bad teachers. Also, it's not only the teachers, the school itself is falling apart. And Nicole, one thought that she said was that she thinks that segregated schools will never catch up. And those were some thoughts that I could agree with her, but I also disagree, because it really depends on the school district and the state superintendent, the Board of Education for that state. They all have to work together. Nicole talked about growing up in Iowa. She could only go to her white friend's house. They weren't allowed to go to her house, her side of the town. They weren't allowed to use the pool that was in her side of town. And she came from a background of segregation. She was bused into the better schools, the white neighborhoods. So she had an idea of what integration looks like. And even though it was better for her, she had a better education, she still was that other child, the other student. Her friends could not go to her house. When they talked about the Normandy School District, she mentioned how Michael Brown's mother said, and he had just graduated only a couple months before he got shot from a Normandy high school, that she said it was so hard to get her son to attend high school, and not many Black teenagers graduate, especially Black male teenagers graduate, and he did graduate, and for his life to be taken away, that was her biggest concern, was that he was not going to be able to attend college, that his degree was not going to be put to use. And in this Normandy School District, they had 0 points across the board, math, English, science. They were the worst district in the state of Missouri, and they needed to do something about it. And when they talked about Mariah and Nidra and the school district that she went to, she knew that her daughter was an excellent student, and she just did not want to put her in the Normandy middle school and high school. And it was around that time the school district was put on probation for 15 years. So the schools never met state standards. She knew that if she was to put, Nidra was to put her daughter continuing in the Normandy school district, her daughter was set up to fail. So she did what she could do. She tried to get into another school district. They said, unless you live in our district, you have to pay $15,000. And she couldn't afford private. And it wasn't until that the Normandy school district lost their accreditation that she had that chance to transfer to another school. What really got to me was the whole discussion around the town hall. And in the Francis, how the parents just, they said it wasn't a race issue, but it obviously was in the way they were discussing it. There was going to be more crime. There was going to be violence. And they were going to want to move out of their community that they moved to just to have this good school district. And later on, Nicole, she mentions that no, it didn't come that way. There was no change in test scores. There was no change in violence. And no, the families did not move out. So in that case, integration did work. And with this information, it opens your eyes to how children need to have that better opportunity to close the achievement gap. They should be provided with that opportunity. But it's not that easy. It has to do with the school districts and accreditation, the building maintenance. If a building is falling apart, or if the student comes from an abusive background, abusive household, they're not going to be able to learn in a bad environment, a school that's falling apart, teachers that don't care. There has to be some effort put in to how these schools are being handled, the principals, the superintendent. They have to put some effort into these bad areas. Well, they need to put more money. If the school, for the standardized testing, if they're getting lower grades, lower points, they should be provided with more funding to make sure that those scores go up, that the achievement gap is closed. When they were talking about Mariah and her first time going to the new school in Francis Howell, and after the very bad town hall with these parents that were very aggressive, she was scared. She didn't know what to expect, but they welcomed her. There were cheerleaders that welcomed her. But that wasn't just the case for everybody. They talked about Rihanna and how she was called vulgar names. She was treated indifferently. She was treated badly. But she continued to go there until they told her she couldn't. She continued to go to Francis Howell. She had a great year. She was asked to even tutor that girl that was mean to her. And she turned another page because her education was important to her, just like her mother thought that her education was important. And that's one thing that we have to do. We have to instill in these children, especially that come from Black neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, how important education is to their adult career. When they have that need to thrive in school, then they'll do better in school. And then money can be put into making the school better, to have more funding for materials, for teachers. So for my final thought, I really feel that integration does play a huge part in upping the scores, the points in a school. And it is important for children of all races to be able to learn together, and they do vibe off each other. But I also think that it has to be thought about what cost. Is it harming the families by bringing in the white suburb kids, but not allowing every child that is from a poor neighborhood to be able to attend these new magnet schools? You have to weigh the good versus the bad. And in my opinion, I think that integration is important, but you also have to think about what's it doing to the families and how is it affecting everybody overall.